Good morning. So I'm here at Abernethy in Perthshire to watch the sunrise today. And you can see, isn't it beautiful? Look at that. Yeah, gorgeous. And down here, there is the town or the village or the small town of Abernethy. And Abernethy is actually, well, it comes from a Pictish word. But what is Pictish? Well, it comes from the Picts. And what are the Picts? Who are the Picts? So the word Aber is the Pictish word, and you can actually see right down the River Tay here. You can see all the way to the Tay Bridge, and the river comes down here into Abernethy, and Aber means confluence. It means confluence in Pictish, and so the river comes here, the confluence is here, and it merges at the town. So this is where it comes from, and you can see here a lot of good farming land, lots of crops. So this was an important place for the Picts, who I'm going to tell you about. I'm going to try and summarise them in 10 minutes, which is a hard job to do. Here we have Castle Law. So I'm about to walk up this hill called Castle Law, and law is actually a Scots word for hill. So yeah, an old Scots word for hill. So if you go to Dundee, they have the highest point in the city, where the city would have originated, is called Law Hill. And that actually means, well, basically hill, because law means hill in Scots. So yeah, but here it's really beautiful. And just walking up through this forest. So, who were the Picts? Well, the Picts were very mysterious people, very mysterious group. Our ancestors, they lived in the north and the east of Scotland from around about the 300s to the 900s. And we don't know where they came from. Yeah, very mysterious people. So basically, the word Picts comes from the Latin word for Picti. So the Romans named them Picts. And they were called Picti because the Picti is Latin for painted ones. So they covered themselves in tattoos, some symbology on their bodies perhaps. They covered themselves in tattoos, or they painted themselves, perhaps blue. Perhaps they used like wad to make tattoos in a kind of blue colour. But yeah, they were blue, covered themselves in blue, like Braveheart after. So like they did in Braveheart, but a long time after that. So yeah, look at this, look at that. Look at that sunrise, gorgeous. So the Picts were very mysterious, and they left behind no real records. They didn't have a written language. So all we know of them is what people told us, what Romans told us essentially, or maybe some Britons, some English later, who kept records. So basically they're enemies. What we know is what their enemies told us. So we don't know much about them, but we know that they were farmers. They used these places for growing crops, and they left a lot of whoa, my shoe's just fallen off. They left beautiful carvings behind. They had a kind of pictorial language, a symbology. So you'll see standing stones where they've left messages, or they've left marks and notes about a battle, or about animals, or about symbology. We don't really know, and they're hard to decode. But the Picts lived at hill forts, so I'm walking up one of these. Whoa! This is fun. I'm walking up one of these hill forts now. I've taken the steepest path. And so 2,000 years ago, this place I'm walking up, it would have been a fort where the Pictish kings, queens would have looked over the area, and they would have been able to watch for invaders and keep themselves safe. So this camera work must look shocking. Yeah, so the Picts were around from the 300s to the 900s. And at the time, there was 4 main areas of Scotland, 4 areas. It was split into 4 kingdoms. There was Pictland to the north and the east. To the west, there was Dalridia. Dalridia was an area where the Scots lived. They spoke Gaelic. They spoke Gaelic there. And they kind of came from Ireland. They were kind of like Celts. So they came over from Ireland, and Dalridia was actually also the kingdom was in a part of Ireland. To the southeast of Scotland, there was the Angles. And to the southwest, there was Strathclyde. So the Angles were kind of more Britons, and also Strathclyde. So just at the top of this hill, this was an old fort. So the Pictish kings and queens would have lived up here, and they were very good at fighting. They were very good at battles. And around about the 500s, things changed for the Picts. So before they were pagans, and then St. Columba came from Ireland. He went to Iona of the west coast of Scotland, and he set up his monastery there. He set up this place for Christian pilgrimage, a Christian sanctuary, a place of education and kind of high art, a lot of great stuff going on there, a lot of literacy. And then from Iona, St. Columba, perhaps before he was a saint, went into Scotland. So he went to Pictland, he went to the Pictish areas, and he is said to have done some miracles, and he converted some of the local people. He converted their religion from paganism to Christianity. So that was a big kind of change for the Picts at the time. And because they had the same religion as Dalridia and the Scots, they started to have a similar culture. So they started to have a similar culture as the Dalridians. They had something in common. So then, that's happened around 500s, and they're starting to become more amalgamated with Dalridians. And then over here, around the coastline in the 700s, late 700s, disaster struck Britain, disaster struck Scotland as well. And the Vikings came. So you can imagine them sailing in their longboats down the sea there, coming down here, down the River Tay. Now imagine you're here in a hill fort in the 800s and the late 700s. So imagine you're here, and you just see boat after boat after boat coming down there, leaving their boats there and coming in to try to attack. So the Picts were great warriors, they were great fighters, and they fought the Norsemen a lot. They fought the Vikings. They also fought the Dalridians. They also fought the Romans. The Picts were very good at keeping the Romans away. And then, so 795, after attacking Lindisfarne in 793 AD, the Vikings attacked Iona, the Isle of Iona, the sanctuary of Iona off the west coast of Scotland. And they attacked it for the first time, they looted it. They went back a few years later and they did it again, and they did it several times. The Vikings just caused carnage. They destroyed everything in Iona. They looted, they massacred the whole population. They just killed everyone.
Well, there's people. It's a die! It's a die!
And they went around the coastline doing this, ransacking, taking people hostage, well, slaves. I don't think they kept hostages, they might have, but took people slaves. And they just caused terror everywhere they went. So there was an immigration. People from Dalridia were flooding into Pict land where it was safer away from the coast. So already the Scots and the Picts and the Dalridians were merging. Yeah, it's impossible to do this in 10 minutes. So already they were merging. And then in 834 AD, the Picts had a big battle with the Vikings, and their army was kind of wiped out almost. Many Pictish kings and nobility died. And so the Picts were left with a kind of vacuum in their leadership. They had no one to go to. And then Kenneth MacAlpin, who was from Dalridia, he came from Dalridia and he slowly conquered Pict land through various means, various deals. There's a famous story about him massacring some of the Pictish kings at a feast. Similar to the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones. So there's a kind of crazy story about that. But yeah, he conquered the Picts. And as he conquered the Picts, because they had no king, he became king of Pict land. But Kenneth MacAlpin, so they were already assimilated in cultures in some ways. And he actually had, his mother was a Pictish princess. And they say that the princesses, the bloodlines of the female sides were more important than the male sides. So Pictish princesses, Pictish queens perhaps, would have been very important, maybe more important than the kings in some ways. But yeah, so Kenneth MacAlpin conquered the Pict land, and he had one of his bases kind of over in that area. But also here was very important, this region. And yeah, after the 900s, well, 800s into 900s, the Picts became assimilated after they were conquered, and the language disappeared. They started to speak Gaelic, and it gave birth to Alba. So slowly, Pict land and Dalridia, from their merging, became Alba, which later became Scotland. So yeah, that's 12 minutes. You can look around this beautiful area, really nice. And yeah, so this is a little bit about Pict land, the Picts who were in this region before. This is Abernethy, and it's a little history of Pict land, the Picts, and of Scotland.